why is there so little coverage? Is it because there's not enough footage of castrated men or decapitated men or men and women hanging off of electrical poles? If that's what will get the attention of viewers, then maybe the media should be encouraged to show what is really happening. I'm Lada Roslycky and I'm in Ottawa today presenting Ukraine Today, which is Ukraine's first international broadcasting station in English, but also to promote information about the war that is taking place in Ukraine, to promote support for international peace and justice. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications for Ukraine Today. Well, it's been a whirlwind traveling month, which started in Toronto, then ended up in Ottawa. In between I was in London and Wilton Park meetings and at the United Nations in New York City. Next week I'm off to Washington, D.C. I'm based in Kyiv and living there, working there under quite strenuous public situation. And I've been there since the middle of this past summer, and I plan to stay in Ukraine as long as possible to ensure that freedom, democracy-loving people actually do have their dignity realized, not only in Ukraine but in Eastern and Central European countries in particular, because the war that is taking place right now is a Russian-provoked attack on democracy all over the world. I have seen a lot of disfigured men, with missing arms, missing legs, fire wounds. I have seen a lot of women who have been tortured, abused in the most horrific ways, and those are the people who are from the front. Internally displaced people. I see anger and desperation, and most disturbingly now I see regular looking people walking the streets of Kyiv, increasingly larger numbers, begging for a loaf of bread. They're not asking for money, they're asking for a loaf of bread. There's a general feeling of desperation and a lack of security. The security that people feel is security that they create for themselves, if they're lucky enough to be able to protect themselves. There's also a great sense of unity, of nationhood, and determination to win the war against evil. However, there's also a great sense of disappointment and frustration that the rule of law and the sword of justice is far off in the distance, seemingly at least. I think that the politicians ruling the country have a very difficult job ahead of them. However, they don't have very much time, and they better get their act together and start caring about the nation and the focusing on lustration, which is incredibly important. There are people in government, in powerful positions, as well as in administrative positions, who are guilty by association of crimes against humanity and war crimes potentially. The Ukrainian government has to remove the evildoers from its own self, even if that means removing themselves from power, honestly. Ukrainians in the streets, or the general population, is very well aware of the complex situation inside of the Ukrainian government, the presidential administration, and the evil forces of corruption. They themselves also play a role inside of that corruption, that corruptive system, because they are victims of it and participants of it. I could say that a significant number of Ukrainian people are relying upon themselves and their own hard work, and they have little hope or belief that the government is going to start taking care of them anytime soon. Importantly, very many people are understanding that the next coming years are going to be very terrible, and a lot of death and suffering is awaiting them. The anti-terrorist operation is what the President and the international community have decided to call this international conflict. I'm sure that they have their reasons. But a complicating factor of this so-called anti-terrorist operation is that it's not only run by the Ministry of Defense. We have the National Guard and the Ministry of Interior involved, as well as some volunteer battalions. In the last few months, the significant number of these volunteer battalions have been put under the command and supposedly effective control of either one of those armed force ministries. People in Canada must stand united for their own values and principles, which allow them to live so freely and in peace with rule of law. And they must educate themselves about the threat that Canada is under should Russian foreign policy succeed inside of Ukraine and Georgia and Eastern Europe. And what can they do? They can really just be aware of who the Russian trolls are when they're looking for information on the internet. They can really look into the background of authors of certain newspaper articles or magazines, or the professors who organize roundtables. Be aware and defend yourself by protecting and supporting dignity in Ukraine. Increasing media coverage and knowledge by proxy of the war in Ukraine is an extremely serious issue that needs to be talked about. And a question asked, why is there so little coverage? Is it because there's not enough footage of castrated men or decapitated men or men and women hanging off of electrical poles? If that's what will get the attention of viewers, then maybe the media should be encouraged to show what is really happening in much in the same manner that the Islamic State is doing. That shock factor perhaps may be what is needed to wake people up. The losses of life are tremendous, and I encourage research to be done into this figure, the official figures that are being provided. They're substantially smaller than other sources are providing. Importantly, there are thousands of people who are missing. Many of them are kidnapped and have been taken away to Russian prisons, Russian territory, and have basically disappeared without a trace. Those people are alive, and whoever Nadia Savchenko may be, she is a symbol particularly for thousands of missing people under Russian and terrorist control, hopefully alive. My private view is that in the long term, the forces of good will overcome, and human dignity will be preserved and will proliferate. But that's in the long term. In the short term, I see a lot of violence and violations of rule of law, and either through naivete or through corruption, figures inside of democratic countries are going to support economic development of, first and foremost, of their own pockets rather than international peace and justice. The material and physical losses are immense, and due to a lack of media coverage in Ukraine, particularly from the Ukrainian side, strangely the Luhansk People Republic, so-called Donetsk People Republic, seem to be getting a little bit more international media coverage. I believe that Eastern and Central European countries must stand united with Ukraine. They have also a great understanding of what it means to be infiltrated with communist thinking and control by way of Kremlin's tentacles. Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, the Baltics, the Czechs, and the Hungarians really need to stand united for democracy, because if we look at that territory, this is beautiful central territory which has a lot of history and a lot of future. If we stand united, investment will come, but first and foremost we must protect our nations and our territories to fight the evil oppressors. Ukraine today has a mission to bring objective, transparent information to your home. We're available on the internet, and we are working very hard to be available via cable in North America. However, in Europe, we're available on Hotbird satellite, and I strongly encourage you to also log into our website uatoday.tv, and reach out to us and we'll reach out to you.
Dr. Lada Roslycky, our guest speaker this evening, is a sought-after and well-known security analyst and human rights advocate. She holds a Master's of International Law specializing in international trade, environmental, and humanitarian law. She also holds a PhD in international relations, analyzing political criminal relations. So please join with me and welcome Dr. Roslycky back to Ottawa.
This documentary film was born as a result of my volunteer work. This summer, I met a man who was brutally tortured by Girkin, under Girkin's orders. This man is still in hospital. For 2 months, his anus and his lower intestines were expanded with a large pole. He has no help except for people like me and friends who come and feed him. He's not alone. While he was telling me about his story, he mentioned that he had heard a woman screaming in the room for about 7 days next to him in the cellar. I started to wonder what happened to that woman. Who tortured them? What is the role that women are playing apart from being strong volunteers? And the stories of rape of women, particularly by Chechen terrorists and people in the DNR, LNR, DPR, LPR groupings are all over the place. The women don't want to speak, but as a volunteer with Euromaidan SOS, which is one of the organizations, more of a political organization that developed after Maidan, I turned to the president of this organization and asked her if she could put me in touch with some women that had been tortured or had different terrible experiences. And she did. The first woman who she introduced me to was Olena Rybak, which is the wife of Volodymyr Rybak, a rather famous politician in Ukraine, who President Poroshenko spoke of in Congress and in the White House. His body was found brutally tortured, together with 2 other bodies in a lake. His intestines had been pulled out, and 2 boys, 19 years old, from Western Ukraine were found with him. I've met the mothers of these 2 boys, and Olena Rybak has become a friend of mine. To give you a sense of how seriously in need of reform Ukraine is, the 2 mothers of these sons, you'll see the photograph is blurred for your stomach's sake, went to the Prosecutor General's office regularly asking for a criminal case to be opened up against for these cases, and the Prosecutor General's office repeatedly told them that there's not enough evidence to suggest that this is not a natural death. The second woman who I met is Anna. Anna was a Maidan girl from Donetsk who was suddenly abducted and taken into a cellar, tortured, knifed. They cut off a part of her finger, forced her to write "I love Donbass" on the wall. And when I asked her what made the largest impression on you after all of this, and as a North American, I thought it would be like the bloody and gory part, but her answer shocked me when she said, actually, when they finally traded me for a terrorist, my friends went to my apartment and they took all my clothes. I was shocked to see that the terrorists, she called them the idiots, stole my vyshyvanka, my embroidered dress. She's now in Kyiv and starting up her own organization for Donbass art, showing that Donbass and Ukraine are one and drawing connections between that. My other friend, I don't know if she's alive anymore. I hope to call her as soon as I get home. She also was Maidan woman. She was feeding men, and the demonstrators on Maidan. And one day they stopped her at a checkpoint, took her, kidnapped her. They injected her with some unknown substance every day that she was in captivity. She doesn't know if she has AIDS. She doesn't know if she has hepatitis C, and this is a war crime. They crushed her skull open. We weren't able to make it to her to film because she was in an area near Shasta, which is under daily bombardments. We see her daughter in this video. And finally, my friend Ola, who's looking for her son. And she wasn't raped, she wasn't cut up, she wasn't forced to play Russian roulette like Olana. She has no support from the Ukrainian government whatsoever. You'll hear a little bit about it in her own testimony. And she's using art as a way to stay sane. In Ukrainsky Dім, which is a central building in the center of Kiev, there are a bunch of women who paint these helmets. This is an original helmet from Maidan. And they sit in a tiny little corner and paint helmets and do art. Guys from the front come in, talk, some of them paint, some of them are clearly disturbed. PTSD is a major issue in Ukraine with very little of a network at this point, but projects are strong and going. Before I turn to the film, I would like to really stress the issue that there is a war going on. Smerch rockets are being used regularly, daily, and that's what we know of. I've been to the front 2 times, hearing during the ceasefire, hearing bomb attacks. So ceasefire, let's think please together that even though the Ukrainian government and presidency really need support and we need to stand united, we also must maintain critical thinking and use our brains to really help the people of Ukraine.